Hi, welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns, Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Doug Lederman, editor and co-founder of Inside Higher Ed.
Each week, I partner with a journalist, most of the time it's Doug, to talk to you with a sitting college president or chancellor to understand what it's like to navigate this really unique moment in higher education history, and hopefully distill a bit of perspective, some insight, some wisdom, and some hope for the week ahead. So that's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom.
This week, we're bringing you an interview and a discussion with Dr. Shanna Jackson, who's president of Nashville State Community College. She served in that role since 2018. Before that, she had escalating administrative roles at both Columbia State Community College and Volunteer State Community College in Tennessee. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Very much appreciate you taking the time. And we were on a panel together, and I was just sharing that I heard you talking, and I was like, how did I not know her? You had a lot of really insightful comments, especially around student success and what it was really like to implement. And so I'm so delighted that you accepted my email and joined us on the show today. So we generally like to set the stage of kind of how are you holding up right now?
You know, all is well. Yeah, things are still very uncertain, even with our hope that people are getting vaccinated and the cases are remaining somewhat stable, but it is an uncertain time right now. And so we are just focused on students. And no matter how many students we have, we want to serve them to the best of our ability. So our work has not changed. How we deliver that work has changed, but we're very positive and hopeful right now about the fall.
That's great. And so for folks who are at home and less familiar, some of the stuff that I found really intriguing about your career trajectory and the work that you do is you became president just 2 years before COVID, right? So 2018. And while you are president, you also, in the middle of that time, you have to serve as your own interim VP for academic affairs. I have so many questions about this, but mainly I would just ask, what have you learned from these experiences that if you were giving advice to yourself as a result of going through this, what advice would you give to make it a little bit easier?
Well, first, I guess I need to explain a little bit about how that happened. I joined Nashville State in June of 2018, and within the first 6 months, I had an understanding that the provost model was not going to work well. We needed someone all day long focused on student success and all day, every day focused on academic affairs. So I actually separated it and created a vice president for student services. And somewhere in the summer of 19, I realized I needed to make a leadership change. And so after the fall semester started, I moved a VP into a different position and decided to take the interim spot instead of naming someone internally. I just felt like that was the best thing for Nashville State. Well, of course, I thought I'd have the position filled by December and everything would be going by January, and it did not happen that way. And so actually we had a failed search, and when COVID hit, it was really difficult going in and out of the role of the president and the vice president of academic affairs. So I think I wouldn't change doing the interim. One thing you will see about my career is I was not a vice president before I became a president. I was actually an AVP. And so it gave me an opportunity to really understand the dynamics between the deans and the faculty and that perspective of student work and success. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about some of the barriers that we really still had there. As much as I was talking from the level of the president and the vision and student success, there were things that were keeping us from being successful. And I think I was able to open those doors. So I would tell myself, you're crazy to do it, just like I did before, but it was certainly worth it. I think the length of time and then doing it during a pandemic was not helpful for anyone. But we survived it, and we got through it, and I think we're stronger because of it. I know as a president, I'm much stronger because I had that time in academic affairs.
So the ascension to the presidency without having been a vice president and without having sort of grown up in higher education and sort of traditional routes that presidents often take. What do you think how has that been an advantage to you? And are there ways in which it's been a disadvantage at all?
Well, I mean, I never thought of myself as being in higher ed when I graduated. So, business, MBA, corporate America, I always wanted to be a president or CEO. So I did always aspire to leadership. But it was an opportunity to teach a part-time course at a proprietary school when my husband relocated to Knoxville and I followed, that changed my life. I mean, it was one of those, you've ever had those life-changing moments? And it was in that classroom that I understood the power of education and action. I grew up knowing I was going to college, but I was in a classroom with students who were the first in their family. And when I learned about all the barriers that they were facing, and I don't just mean academic, that was there, but transportation, childcare, and more importantly, the lack of support from their family and friends, I knew I had to be the support that my family gave to me. And so I carried that classroom experience with me. I didn't want to teach intro to business year after year after year. So I knew I didn't want to be a full-time faculty member, but that cause, that education is really and truly one of the strongest ladders to economic and social mobility. I carry that with me today. And so it's just been really a blessing that when I started the community college, I was able to develop a great relationship with the president, who eventually created a position called executive assistant to the president that gave me a seat at the table with senior leaders. And then when I went to Columbia State, I had another wonderful president who knew and supported my desire to be one. So I had the title of assistant vice president for the Williamson campus, which was a brand new campus, from concept to construction that I brought out the ground. It could have been campus president, but I just didn't have the title. And although titles matter, I have learned experience can outweigh it. And so that is how I have been just building my career to get the experiences that I needed, even a little stint with resource development and fundraising and along the way that has really helped prepare me. So I think my mindset's different because I do think sometimes like the business leader, I have to remind myself that I am when we get back into this old way of doing things in education, and that I am looking at preparing students to go to a 4-year and be successful or go to work. And so I think about what supports do they need every day to help them get to their goals.
That's helpful. So I'm curious because I'm thinking about Philip Rogers, I think from ACE, who's now president in North Carolina, and I think it's a really interesting trajectory. And as a former chief of staff, I'm aware how much you know from being around in that space, and I'm curious if for those who are in that space, who are in that kind of inner circle, who are responsible for help guiding and advising presidents to navigate complex challenges, what do you think was, I'm sure you came in really somewhat intimately understanding the role of the presidency. What surprised you despite that? Because I'm curious if you could share that for people who are in a similar position.
That is a great question. There's a couple of things that surprised me. One, I like to think out loud. That is just who I am. I'm a collaborative leader. I like to get people in a room. I like to talk. But every word I said, people were trying to do. And so you have to start learning how to guard your words or say, I'm just thinking out loud. Because literally that first 2-3 months, people were running, trying to jump and do things. So I think it's more of a understanding that you're now in a role and that people consider you an authority. And even though you think you're collaborative and it's participatory and I want everybody to have a voice, the weight that your voice carries. And so that was surprising to me that I had to start saying, I'm just thinking out loud. The other thing I think that surprised me, and I think it's particular to Nashville State, is how insular they were. I'm such a big partnership person. Have seen a lot, been able to participate in wonderful things. Like we talked about the Aspen program. and how they had not. And so you can't just say the words, I want to redesign the student experience. They didn't know what I was talking about. And so you have to actually take them. Okay, I want you to go visit this place. I want you to go see these things. So even though I had the student success and the words that I was using, you have to realize that sometimes people don't know what you're talking about, but they'll nod their head and say yes. And we are not achieving the results. So I think as a leader and as the president, you have to realize your voice matters. People are listening to you. They want to please you. They want to do the work. But you can't just always speak it and then think that they understand it. You have to show people sometimes what it is that you're looking for. And so part of my journey in these almost 3 years has been building that strong leadership team, that we understand one another, that the words mean the same thing, and that they can now disseminate and create that same culture and opportunities for people that they supervise.
How did the pandemic reshape your view of or affect your view of what students need from an institution like yours, and what have you done in response?
Well, Nashville State is really in an urban market. We're in Nashville. We serve 7 other communities, and so we do have a mixture of rural and suburban, but the heart of my students are from Nashville. And so I came from a college that sat in one of the wealthiest, the highest educational attainment. And so I was dealing with parents more than I was dealing with students. When you come to Nashville State, you realize it's the same students that I had in my classroom in Knoxville. Still a lot, majority first generation, issues with transportation, childcare, textbooks. So I saw right away in that first month as a president, we don't have a lot of support for students. And so I am proud of the work we've been able to do. We have opened up campus cupboards, food pantries. We have focused the foundation on more beyond financial aid support, with textbooks and childcare. And we've created a student success model. But the pandemic highlighted a need we had not been discussing: technology. And that was just highlighted, that students not only needed devices, they needed Wi-Fi connections. They needed to understand how to use technology, because we still had so many on-ground sections. So when we did the swift transition, and in this case, it wasn't just the students that had to learn, faculty as well, but they didn't know how to use the technology. And so that really became evident. And so we started a laptop loaner program. We loan out Wi-Fi hotspots. Of course, many of these things we've been able to do because of the federal funds for COVID, but we're going to find a way to continue them. The other thing that it highlighted, which was a focus for the college, but even brought more awareness, was the equity gap between our Black and white students. And so remember, you had COVID, you had George Floyd, you had all of this social unrest, and you realize that there are systemic issues that are keeping our Black students from being successful. And so that was highlighted as well. And so the focus is on equity. You may be aware we have Tennessee Promise, Tennessee Reconnect. Here's tuition and fee free. Why aren't more students coming to college? Those are equity programs. And we are equality programs, equality. We're happy to have them, but they don't all start at the same place on that line. And so we are working to better identify what students need earlier and help support them through their journey. And so again, equality programs, but we need to have an equity lens and realize that people need different supports. And some of our students have a lot of barriers to overcome.
So you talked about engaging in student success redesign and transforming the student experience, right? And I heard a bit of just some of the significant changes that you've advanced, and I think there have been some pretty big ones. But I'm just wondering, for you as a president, because this is something I notice a lot, is that student success in particular feels ambiguous, and it's difficult for some presidents to kind of peer down into the institution and actually know how to fix it, to actually know how it's doing, because we can look at all kinds of indicators, we can look at graduation rates, and we can pick a random data point, but it's actually really kind of hard for to be at the senior level and look down into the institution and have a clear sense, an accurate sense. So for you, as you have gone through all this transformation, when you look for an indicator of feeling like that for you confirms that the work is really happening and that it's making a difference, is there any one thing that really you check up against and you make sure and you feel like that for you is the sense of confirmation that keeps you moving and you feel like you're doing the right stuff?
I don't know that there's any one thing. I'll just be honest about that. What I have been really excited about, even in the midst of the pandemic, when people are tired and there's all this anxiety, is that we are putting students at the center. And it's in the conversations that we're having, even with faculty saying, how is this? We need to help our students. I just recently hired a VP of business and finance, and it's like, you need to be focused on students and you need to make sure facilities and IT and everybody is focused on students. And so really kind of what I did was disrupt Nashville State and just think of a puzzle. You just throw it out on the ground. And they were so ready to start putting pieces together. And I was like, we're not ready. We're not ready. There were some foundational things that we needed to get in place so that we could work together and have this shared vision of becoming what I like to say a student-ready college. And so now I'm starting to see it click in people that this is what we've been talking about, that these policies shouldn't be what's most convenient for us, but what's best for students. And so I'm starting to see it at all levels. The conversation around the table is changing. People are working together in different ways. So I don't know that there's one indicator. For me, I'm waiting for our outcomes to match the work that is happening at the college. Because I think all of these puzzle pieces are starting to form. We're bringing up a welcome center, a one-stop shop, and that's going to feed into our student success center. And then we are really focusing now on elevating teaching and learning. Because I can pick you up, I can feed you, I can take care of your kids. But when you get in that classroom, if you do not have a positive experience, you're going to leave. And so that is our next bucket that we're really focused on, faculty and investing and professional development. And there's a lot of good things that we're doing, like poverty training and really understanding cultural bias. And so it's not just words anymore. Go out and treat students better. It's how are we going to do that? And we actually develop some core values around who we are as a college that we didn't have before. So seeing that come alive, those are the things that I go, we're getting it. We've made the pivot. We're focused on student success.
I can't think of a president I've talked to recently who hasn't acknowledged the need, or at least used the rhetoric about transformation. And I'm interested in how you transformation and words like that can be kind of scary to people who are being told they need to transform. And so I'm curious how you started that conversation and how you with how you challenged your colleagues to accept the idea that they needed to do things differently, and what you did when you ran into friction.
So all of that's great. I will say I use data to tell the story. So I came in June. First convocation is in August. First, I'll say they never had convocation. They never brought the college all together. So that was a first shocker. You mean we're all going to come together? Yes, all 6 campuses. We're going to come together and we're going to have a meeting. And so I started presenting data, and I did it more in a quiz, like, out of these different demographics, who has the highest, persistence or completion rate. And so it was a quiz. We actually did some interaction, right? And so they're voting, what's the African-American male 3-year graduation rate? And you put all these numbers up. Oh, it's 4.3%. No one selected that. They selected the double-digit numbers. And I had to tell them, this is not acceptable. It should not be acceptable to us. And so once they saw that our outcomes weren't meeting our mission, like it's not enough just to bring them in. We were very much community college 1.0, enrollment, enrollment, enrollment. And we had been on an enrollment decline, and the college knew that was happening before I came, but it was masking the problem of persistence and retention. And so being able to show that if we could keep the base of people we have, we don't have to add as many new people, although we want them all. And so I think telling that story through data and saying good college, but not great. And that was one of my, I think my theme, good to great. And I'm sure you all know about that. And just really saying, we have to say to ourselves, is this the best we can do for students? And is this the best our students can do? And if the answer is no, we got to change. And so that helped, I think, that it wasn't just this new president and she wants some new words and she's going to have this new theme. It was, we have to do better by our students. The hard part, I think the challenge was helping faculty and even staff actually take ownership. Because the first thing they're going to say, give me better students. Give me better students and we can have better outcomes. And so borrowed from a friend, you have to love the students you have, not the ones you wish you had. And so these are our students. And so that's the journey we're really starting to embrace now, understanding our students and what their needs are, not what we think they need. But that early beginning of the transformation and why this was important, it was putting the data that they had not seen before and asking that question, is this the best we can do for our students? So that's really where that work started.
So I'm curious about, and we talked a little bit earlier, you mentioned the Aspen program, but for folks who want to figure this out, I'm curious about how you identified the right steps that would work, the right messaging, the right focus in the way that you just described. What experiences prepared you the best for being able to lead a campus that was going to wrestle with some of these really serious challenges that a lot of campus leaders have claimed to want to improve, but have not been able to. So I'm just, because you've actually been able to implement a lot of really significant change. Clearly, some of the stuff that you've done before this that prepared you must be the right stuff.
Well, I mean, I definitely have to highly credit Aspen. And if anybody's interested in being a president, I highly recommend that you apply for the Rising Fellowship Program. Interestingly enough, and we mentioned this before we went live, I became a president in June, had my first session in July. So I was really learning and going. So you come up with like, how did you create this? Like I was learning from Aspen, this framework of student success and how to talk about community college 1.0 and 2.0 and give people words that they could understand what I was trying to say. So a lot of that was trial and error. I wish I had Aspen 6 months before I started, but I think it worked out fine. I came from an institution before Nashville State that had some of the highest completion and persistent rates. So I saw what that looked like to invest in students and was a part of breaking it all the way down from, how often do we communicate with students that apply? What is that communication gap? Well, at Nashville State, they could apply in September. We're not talking to them again until May or June saying, hey, you need to turn your stuff in. Like, that's not how you keep students motivated and warm and encouraged. And also went through several different methods of advising and orientations while I was at my former institution that, it just seemed to me all we were concerned about was getting you in a seat, and good luck. And that just wasn't going to work. And so understanding what some of those fundamental things were, even low-hanging fruit that we could change, is what I was able to bring. I also think being a part of the Tennessee Board of Regents system for now 20 plus years helped because I had established relationships. So, being at a community college in Tennessee was not new. What was new for me is what was missing. I'm like, well, so where are these things that I'm expecting us to have? And they're like, you mean we can do that? I was like, yes. And let me show you, what we need to do. And so I think it was just, again, a different kind of culture where they were not a bad institution and they loved students. They were a good institution, but they weren't focused on completion at all. And so that is really what has led the change. Because you have to go all the way through the student life cycle And so my next journey is already starting to warm them up. We're going to talk about post-completion, because getting them to the graduation line is not enough for me. Are they well prepared to transfer to a 4-year and complete at an acceptable rate of time? Are they going into the workforce and being successful because we've trained them well? And so that is our next stage to get to Community College 3.0, but we're just trying to hit 2.0. But we're already talking about post-completion because that indicates how our programs are. Is it of good quality? Are we really adequately preparing students to do well when they leave us? And that will feed and bring resources to the college if we do that well. So we are in the midst of starting to talk about post-completion while we're trying to get to 2.0.
That's great. And so I'll just end on this one question. So you really investigated and pursued understanding the presidency, and obviously engaged with a great program that helped support you as you made the final decision to do this job. I'm just curious if there was one piece of advice or a couple pieces of advice that has been the most useful to you as you lead, that perhaps you might often give to other people.
It's one I keep having to work on, to be quite honest, and that is celebrate the good and give yourself a break. We have high expectations, I think, as presidents of how we want work to I just say it, you just go. Once I learned that there's power in my voice, I'm expecting these things to happen organically and work out. Well, I have to remember that we have come a long way, because I'm looking at how far we still have to go to get to 2.0, but we've done a lot of good work. And it's oftentimes when I hear someone else say, oh, you've done a lot of work, I go, yes. So celebrate the good. Let people know that they're doing a good job. I underestimate that sometimes because I guess I don't always need that constant feedback. It's nice to hear that people think you're doing a good job, but some people really need to do that. So be more intentional about celebrating the good, especially in the midst of the pandemic. There's so many other things people are thinking about, but then give yourself a break. What I learned very quickly, well, I won't say quickly, within the first year, oh my God, this is going to take much longer than I thought. Because I had this whole Pollyanna idea. I'm going to walk in, I'll fix enrollment, we'll be growing. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's a lot to unpack here. We're still peeling back layers of, oh, this is broken, this is broken. And so I had to start saying this is a marathon, not a sprint. And we're preparing for the long haul. And so I'm excited about this journey that we're on. I think we're headed in the right direction. Often when I look at the Aspen winners, you just go, oh, I'm a terrible president. Oh, look at this amazing stuff they're doing. But then you realize it took them 10 years to do it. It didn't happen in 2. And so give yourself a break. As long as you know you're headed in the right direction, monitor and adjust when needed, and celebrate the good.
That's a perfect way for us to end today. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I believe this show, while it was sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation, it could have been sponsored by Josh Weiner, right? It's essentially a plug for their incredible programs, which every time I work with Aspen, I'm always so impressed. Yeah, they do great work. So this is a clear testament. And so thanks so much for sharing your insights with us, Doug. As always, I'll see you next week. And for folks at home, we're going to be seeing Millie Garcia coming up next week. And then I think the week after, we might have Michael Crow in our 1-year anniversary. So stay tuned for that. And otherwise, we hope you have a wonderful week.
Thank you.